Okay, we are live with Aleksander Kravic. Am I saying it right? Kravic. How do you say your last name?
Kravic.
Kravic. You sounded
So
deeper voice than me, Kravic. And the reason I forget, you got one of our emails and you responded to our email with like almost like a big story about, you know, some of your background and your life and that whole bit. Is that how we met? That's how we met.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you about that, but you asked me a question because your first name is, you know, you go by Alex, and the full first name is Aleksander, and you asked about Nick's name, Aleksander, but Nick's first name is a different spelling than your name because his Aleksander is, I'm assuming, the Scottish or British version because our mother is Scottish. My first name is actually Tomislav, and I think my mom thought, oh my gosh, you know, I have to balance this out a little bit. My full name is Tomislav Mio Karađa, and then so he got Nicholas Alexander, the British side. So that's kind of, our names are different. So his is different than your spelling. But I want to learn more just about your story. So, and I think I want to kind of just start at the beginning. So we'll get into some of your thoughts on real estate and the whole world of interest rates. And how old are you?
29.
You're 29. I'd like to get your viewpoints on the world right now, but take me from the beginning. How do you go is it 2.5 years old you arrive in Canada?
Yep.
Okay. Can you just like explain to everyone where you were born, a little bit about your parents and background? I just want to paint this picture a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Alex. First of all, pleasure to be on the show and super grateful, and thank you for having me. So yeah, I came to Canada, to London, when I was 2.5 years old from Nevesinje, which is about 40 kilometers east of Mostar and about 2 hours south, I believe, of Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which at that time was former Yugoslavia. So yeah, we just came to Canada because of what was going on out over there with the Civil War in the 90s. That obviously was pretty traumatic and devastating to a lot of families.
What were your parents doing there? Did they run, like our family there was like, I would call them, in the Canadian version would be like farmers, like living in a village, raising animals and kind of living off the land in those animals. Our father was born in the bush, close to, not too far from where you were. What was your family doing?
They were both high school teachers, actually, and so was my uncle, and they were teaching all the way up until the war and when it started. So we do have a farm in a smaller area just outside of Nevesinje called Trtina. So just a village where we had basically, I guess you would say, a farm, like just a home in the middle of nowhere, like not a lot of neighbors.
I've seen
nearby.
those homes.
Yeah.
It's really in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, you can't go to the bath. Like, you got to go to the bathroom. You go somewhere where there's no toilets. You just.
I remember when I was there, and our family house there had no toilets. It didn't even have running water. There was a well. There were only 3 walls to our house there. And one of my friends from Canada that came with me much later when we were in university and we were touring through Europe, he's like, you realize your house here only has 3 walls. I'm like, well, I never really thought about it. He goes, it's built into the side of what I can tell it looks like a rock hill. And then there's like 2 other walls and a third wall, but the front of the house is wide open. So if it rains or snows, like anything will just come right into the house. And you walk in this center area, and then there's just like breakout bedrooms and the kitchen. But even to get in the kitchen, the first room of the kitchen is actually the smokehouse, where my grandmother would on the floor bake bread. And there'd be a big chain coming from the ceiling, and she would just have a pot of water that was like constantly boiling with something going on in this water. And then if you looked up in the roof, it was all black from all the fire, but there was also meat being smoked up there. And then you would walk into the second room, and it's more like a normal kitchen, but the stove was a wood burning stove. So they were burning wood in the morning to maybe cook some eggs or something like that. I just remember big pots of milk, like just raw milk, sitting right on top of that stove. I guess they were boiling it or something before they gave it to us. I don't even remember. But they're like, when you talk about a house in the middle of nowhere, for people who don't understand, it's really in the middle of nowhere, and to go to the washroom, there would just be toilet paper by the door, and you would just like walk outside and you would just find a spot. And when I was small, when I came to visit, my aunt found some rock that she kind of carved out into like a almost like a toilet, but I didn't have running water. And this is really embarrassing to share, but now we're really deep into this, so I will. And I guess I would just use that toilet to go number 2. And I guess she would clean it out because I think the next time I would use it, it'd be all clean. But I know that's disgusting for everyone listening. But as I got older, you just went out into the bush. Like you literally just went out into the bush, did your business, and came back, and that was just normal. And it's like it seems shockingly kind of. I mean, if you're not used to it, I guess it's just shocking to see it. And I remember having that friend there in the early 90s and explaining to him that when we went on school trips here in the Toronto area to Pioneer Village, which is by York University, they would explain to us in grade school that this is how people back 100 years ago used to live. But in the Pioneer Village by York University, they had like a pump for water. They had an outhouse. It was more advanced than my family's village. And I think it was the first time I realized that, like, wow, we're probably a very poor family. Like we come from nothing, like really nothing, So when you see these places in that part of the world, you're just in the middle of nowhere. I think it breeds toughness though. Alex, what? Sure. But sorry, I took us off track. So yeah, you went to the washroom outside somewhere. I apologize, everyone. This is part of my childhood, and you're making me remember all this stuff. Your parents are high school teachers. You're 2.5 years old. Brothers or sisters?
Yes, one older brother, 3 years older.
3 years older, and then they just pack up. Do you remember did they tell you anything? Like, how did they get out of the country at that time? Do you remember?
No, honestly, I don't know what happened around that time. I try not to bring up some of those discussions. I mean, maybe I can now that I'm older, but definitely it was...
You should, because that's part of your family's history. You want to know these details. But okay, you come to Canada, and then they're high school teachers. Can they work as high school teachers here?
No. It was just, I think my mom had to do additional schooling because my mom finished an undergrad in engineering, and I think my dad did an undergrad in history. And when they came here, it was just, nothing transferred over. My mom was taking courses at Fanshawe College just with regards to some software engineer stuff. But my dad just got a job at Nestle.
They're English? They could speak English okay?
A little bit. Yeah, they could speak a little bit,
okay.
But definitely not to the extent that you would require. So I remember my dad would tell me stories when we came here, because my uncle came first, like a year before. So he kind of helped us kind of find our way. So at least we had someone, but that was...
And that's why you were in London?
Yeah, that's why we were in London, because he was in London earlier. So he helped kind of sort that out. But we got here in Canada and just struggling to make ends meet. Like my dad would deliver newspapers at like 3 a.m. when it was -40 out, and just to make like a couple $100 a month on top of working at Nestle. And he would bike to Nestle, like the ice cream factory, from one side of the city to the other. And he told me a story how he was literally biking on the highway, like when it was -30, and just, because we had no car at the beginning, like just, no money, no car, like no English, none of the skills transferred. So you would just see that growing up, just how much they struggled and how much they grinded to get to where they are now. Did you think they were struggling then, or only upon reflection did you think they were struggling? Oh, they're definitely struggling. Yeah. We were living, we moved around to a bunch of places. I remember the first place we were in, there were cockroaches in the house, and I remember going for allergy testing several years later, and I had a reaction to cockroaches. But usually with allergy testing, the only way that you can test for something is if you've had exposure to it, and that would have explained it from then. So we weren't living in the best conditions, just renting places, going from place to place, and having barely much to survive on top of just covering the basics, like basic food and water. Did your dad continue working at Nestle for many years? Yeah, he's actually still there, so he's been there for 27 years. Yeah. Wow. And then your mom, you said she was taking some classes. Kudos to her, to come to Canada and then try taking classes, and English isn't your first language. Was your mom working? Did she find something to work as well, to do for work as well? She ended up finding work as an assignment coordinator at an interpretation company in London that just helps actually people like her that have come from other countries assign, interpreters to help manage, appointments or medical stuff. And she first worked as an interpreter for other people who came from Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, to just translate. And then she became one of the coordinators with regards to that, but nothing really in relation to what she finished school with and being a teacher, or also in the engineering field. It was kind of, just something to find. Because
Do you think they were like, so sorry, I don't know, I know you don't know, can't speak directly for them, but I guess they were still happy they were in Canada, or were they just regretting being here? Like, what's the mindset like?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think.
What year is this? This is the 90s?
This is 95 when we came,
okay.
April 95. I mean, it's tough because they obviously were thinking in the past in terms of how nice it used to be before the war started, how everyone got along. Like, it didn't matter where you were from or what your religion was. It was all just, if you're a good person, you're a good person. But then with the war, you always have flashbacks to before the war and how nice it was. So all the family was back in Serbia or in Bosnia. I think we might have had some in Croatia. But everybody was back home, so it's hard when their parents and their parents, uncles or brothers, uncles, aunts, all that are over there, and then only my mom's younger brother was here in Canada. So it's hard because everyone's over there, you're here, you don't know. Fortunately, London did have a small like Serbian community, or just like a Balkan community.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were able to get, like, when we were renting a place after a few, we had that small community, which helped because obviously people are coming under similar circumstances, so they know what to expect, and you have people to talk to and kind of go through the process of trying to assimilate into a different country. So that helped, but I mean, definitely it's not the same as how it was for them back there before the war. But I mean, they had to do what they had to do in that time period. But I think it was that decision: do we leave and try to provide a better future for our kids, or do we stay? And some of the family chose to stay, and they made that jump. So
it's just crazy to think about that. Like I talked to some about this with friends and stuff, and that was just the 90s. Like I guess that can sound like a lifetime ago, but that area went through a vicious war. Like, there was people who were friends for years, family friends for years, that when the war started, mortal enemies immediately. Like, it just went bad, like, or really bad, like a vicious. Just thinking about some of the stuff from that era that I would see when you would get news updates and stuff, like, it was just bad. And how times can change so quickly. And then that area had a currency meltdown. Like, there was a hyperinflation episode through there. It's just crazy to think about, like, growing up here, and you grew up here. When you think about what people were going through there, it just, to me, shows you how resilient people are, because there's so many people just like made it through all that shit. And somehow, I feel like it's a miracle, living through hyperinflation and war and coming out the other end of it, leaving where you grew up to different areas. You came all the way to Canada. I'm sure some people just moved around kind of more locally there. But you got the benefit of kind of growing up in peaceful Canada. So you grew up and you went to school in London, and you were here at 2.5. So for you, it was like you were kind of growing up, Canadian. Like, it was like a nice kind of upbringing for you, I'd imagine, in London.
Yeah.
And the parents then, what was their communication to you just to go to school and then go to university? Were you pushed to go to university? That's usually from that area of the world. That type of European mentality is usually like, you must go to university.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I feel like I actually wasn't pushed at all. Like, they never really told me, you should be studying, go do your homework. I kind of just would do it because, again, just based on seeing them growing up, and, you're a kid, you're moving to Canada, you don't really remember much, but I'm sure a lot of that or subconsciously stuck with me in terms of just the I guess, minimalist mindset, or just trying to create something out of nothing that you would just feel that they went through. And yeah, nobody really pushed me to study or to do I just did it because I knew, like, I wanted to make them proud because of everything that they did for us. I felt like I had to. There's no other way to, like, I couldn't just be lazy when, they tell us the stories, you know what I mean? So yeah, definitely no pushing. They were just always there for me if I needed help with homework. Like, my mom would always help me. Dad's working, mom's helping a lot, like, around the house. And yeah, definitely had a good upbringing in terms of, like, relatively speaking, but a lot of things that I heard just going to school, it's just so different in terms of, I got to go see my grandma this weekend or something. I'm like, at least your grandma is, like, nearby, whereas I see them once every 5 or 6 years, and flights are expensive at that time when you don't have a lot of money to see. So just, like, things that I felt like a lot of my classmates would take for granted, I was just yearning for, or even, like, Christmas presents. We didn't get Christmas presents, or we got, like, very minimal stuff. There's no money for Christmas presents. So just like seeing things like, oh, I only got, this gift or that gift. And we're like, and you're still a kid. You still want to try to compare what you got relative to other
It's just natural.
friends. But you're like, almost like, I remember I'd lie. I'd just be like, yeah, like they just gave me money and stuff. And meanwhile, I probably got like a little toy or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's just how it was. Yeah.
I remember going, so I'm, obviously much older than you. And I remember going there in the 80s and landing, and in our luggage, first of all, I don't know why it took us so long to get wheels on luggage, because back then we had like leather suitcases that we had to lug around. But I remember going there and we would bring Levi jeans. I remember specifically Levi jeans, Duracell batteries, and aspirin. Like, we would just load up on aspirin, load up on Duracell batteries, because out in the village there, they had no light at night. So, they had flashlights, but it was too expensive to get batteries, I guess. So we'd get these batteries, and then jeans. They always wanted Levi's jeans. And it was like, it kind of just felt like what you would see in the movies, like you're just bringing the stuff, and the stores there had no product on the shelves. So like coming from Canada, seeing the grocery stores here with like honeycomb cereal and birthday cakes and stuff. And then I'd go to the stores there in the 80s and look at the shelves, and there was nothing there. Like the chocolate on the shelves was all from one company called Kravic. That was the company. And that was it. Like there was a few varieties, maybe 2 or 3 varieties. There wasn't even really cookies. There was just, I think they were called Napolitanke, like little wafer cookies. And that was like the only type of cookie. And it was just like going into another universe going over there. So anyway, you go to school here, and then you go to university. Walk me through, how do you get to the point from going through university to getting interested in, like we've crossed paths because you got interested in real estate in some way. What happens? You go to high school and then you end up at Western?
Yeah.
So
Western.
what'd you do at Western? How did that go? What are you doing now?
Yeah. So Western went for kinesiology for 4 years. Played pretty high competitive basketball when I was in high school. We should have said that
you're 6'5". Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
When I was in high school, yeah, I had some offers, but I actually had a lot of injuries when I was in my last year. So my last season of high school just didn't kind of pan out the way I wanted. So I just went to Western just because it was in London. Like I didn't really plan on going to Western. I wanted to go, somewhere away from the city, but I always wanted to go somewhere away from the city if it was on a basketball scholarship, either in the States or somewhere in Canada.
Oh, wow.
So, so unfortunately that didn't work out, but it also forced me to kind of just grind at school, just realizing you're just so used to when you're in high school, like if you played any sports, like that was my identity. So trying to find an identity in university where I would just go to school was very difficult at first. But I became a personal trainer when I was, I think, in second year. I worked at the rec center, just kind of in the weight room. And then that got me motivated into personal training, and then just using exercise and my kinesiology background to try to motivate people, help people get stronger, teach them exercise prescription. That motivated me to become a personal trainer. I was able to meet a lot of people, and that kind of became my identity. So I would associate with like the rec center staff. So I would, know a lot of people through there, because, when you're coming from a different city, it's easy to meet new people. Like I would just hang out with people from London, but just through your residencies if you're from out of town. But for me, it was the rec center staff that I got to know well, and then that got me into personal training. And then just looking at physiotherapy, I eventually went into physio. So that was a 2-year master's program after the 4 years in kinesiology, and that was just kind of a way where it's there's a component of personal training, but it's also in the medical field. So I have to do more schooling with regards to it, but it's more the scientific side of it. I mean, personal training obviously incorporates that, but it was just something that I felt like I could progress more into versus just kind of being a personal trainer. Not that there's nothing wrong with being a personal trainer, but I felt that experience as a personal trainer catapulted me to consider a career, just the one-on-one working with people. I was looking at going into medicine, like becoming a doctor as well, but I had some pretty bad experiences with family physicians. Nothing against family physicians, or just.
I like the way you covered yourself there. Yeah, nothing against family physicians.
Nothing against family physicians.
Bad experiences.
Just like the walk-in clinics, I didn't like the fact that you only spent a few minutes with.
So
people.
rough.
So I liked physio because you can spend 20, 30, 40 minutes getting to know people and just knowing what I know now. I think that's very important in somebody's recovery and rehab. And I didn't want to do the MCAT, and I hated chemistry in first year that I took. But that kind of swayed me away from the doctor medical field and going to physio. And did 2 years physiotherapy at Western as well. So hashtag bleed purple. Been there for a while, and still personal training kind of on the side while going to physio school. And then I've been working as a physiotherapist for the last 4 years, full time at the hospital, and I just started my own clinic about a year ago.
So how does it work as a physiotherapist at the hospital? If somebody is in there, the doctors that are doing surgery will refer locally into the hospital to a physiotherapist or something?
So there's inpatient physiotherapy and outpatient. So inpatient is the people who have to stay overnight because they can't just go home the next day.
Oh, got it. Yeah,
because
okay.
of the severity of their injury or the surgery or just their age and all these other factors. So I work as a physiotherapist in the inpatient unit, inpatient orthopedics and trauma. So people who have come in from usually hip fractures, but it can be leg fractures, it can be ankle fractures, it can be motor vehicle accidents where there is multiple fractures, not just in your leg, but both legs, both arms, things like that. So it's a lot of
holy shit, dude.
Yeah, it's a lot of basic mobility, like things that we take for granted, like being able to teach them how to use crutches, walkers, how to teaching them about the surgery, teaching them about getting in and out of bed, doing stairs, like just kind of more basic stuff. But because there are
you see people at a rough time in their life.
For sure. Yeah. We see a lot of people in very rough stages in their lives, but also a lot of violence, like people who have, been shot, been stabbed.
Holy smokes.
A lot of homeless people who are just, not able to maintain kind of some of the therapies or care outside of the community. So then they come back because their leg gets infected or just stuff like that. And then you have to figure out a lot of discharge planning, because when you work in a hospital, it's all about
getting out of the hospital.
Out of the hospital. If you're in an acute care hospital, which is where I am. There's rehab hospitals as well, but the acute care hospital that I'm in, we have to free up the beds. So we have to try to get people out as safely and as quickly as possible. So if they can't go home because their home is inaccessible, and they're living alone already, and now they can't put any weight in their leg, how are they going to function just at home if they have no family or friends to support? So we have to figure out alternatives,
And you see a lot of people like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. You don't realize like how the system, how it works, like in terms of if somebody gets injured and let's say they break their ankle, they can't put any weight through their ankle. So now they got to hop. It's easy for us to be able to hop because we have crutches, we have good upper body strength. But what about somebody who was barely able to walk even before this? Now this is going to set them back much further. So if they can't move and they all run all these complications of lying down in bed, like pneumonias and blood clots and pressure sores, then where do they go? Right? So we have to try to, get them stronger, get them moving so that they can show progress. Maybe we apply for a rehab bed at a rehab hospital, or we apply to maybe a retirement home. Or if they're not making any progress, any improvements, they're just getting worse, then possibly long-term care. Because again, where else are they going to go if they can't?
So we have something called rehab hospitals in this province?
Yeah.
And those are hospitals that just take people overnight while they're trying to rehab to a state that they can go home?
Yes. Yeah. If they're from the city, then you can, and if they're not quite yet ready for home, then the rehab hospital is like that bridge that gives them some more time to continue to try to build up their strength, their mobility, being able to be independent with different activities just that they would do in the day, so that when they're ready, then they become discharged from that hospital to home.
Wow. Is there something you see from people as they age that maybe as they're getting into their 50s, 60s, 70s, that they should keep in mind to make sure they're, have good mobility? Is it just constant movement? Like I'm assuming you see people in their 60s get injured and they're already not very mobile. So is it just we all need to keep moving as we age?
Yeah, moving plays definitely a big role. Strength training, things that you do in the gym, or even there's classes for seniors or elderly.
So trying to maintain some muscle mass on the bones.
For sure, because that would be the difference between. There's a lot of falls. We see a lot of falls, especially in the older people coming from, retirement homes, long-term care. But even it can be somebody you're walking your dog. I've seen so many people break their leg or their ankle or their hip.
So you think more muscle mass on you just prevents the break?
It can help a lot of what you do, like from an osteoporosis perspective or a bone strength perspective, is what you do in your early years. You can't necessarily prevent that from happening if, let's say, you haven't worked out your whole life and you just start a few weeks before you fall. But at the same time, by you working on, a lot of strength exercise, load bearing exercise for your bones, that can at least help to try to preserve some of the bone mineral density.
Don't you get people fighting back who say, hey, I'm already a certain age, I'm already late 30s, 40s, I'm not going to start doing strength training now? But what I'm hearing is that strength training or lifting weights just helps the bones maintain density.
Yes, or it also decreases the rate at which you lose that bone mass and that bone mineral.
Okay,
because you're gonna lose it. Just, you can work out your whole life, but you're obviously gonna lose a certain percentage. It's just how fast is that loss gonna happen?
I've decided I have a lot of bone, Alex. I know. I just know that. I don't know. See, I have thick bones. I was at some biohacking conference once, and they made me lie down on some bed where they measure your bone density. Yeah. And the girl taking it was like, "Holy shit!" The machine was probably like not configured properly, but she's like, "You're in like the 99th percentile on bone density that we have data on in this particular machine so far." And it just made me feel good. I'm like, "Yeah, that's right. I have dense bones. Who knows if it's accurate? I have no idea. I should probably do it again." But bone density. And is there an easy workout? Like, is it just like simple deadlifts people should do? Like, is there something you recommend to people, or just like, what would be a strength exercise that people should do but that don't do?
That's a good question. I would say compound lifts are probably one of the
so like a deadlift, off the ground.
Squats, but upper body stuff too, right? Push-ups, things where you're generating force into the ground. That's reverberating, I guess, force back to you. So not to say that swimming or cycling or things aren't bad for you, because obviously they're good for your heart, good to get your heart pumping, but you want to try to do exercises that are weight bearing from a bone mineral density perspective, walking, running, strength training, because when you're lifting weights, it doesn't even have to be weights, it can be a resistance band. That force that you're applying to the bone, so the muscle connects to the bone via the tendon, that pull is helping helping with the bone strength. So you have to do exercises that are strengthening exercises.
So my wife, who's 50, who had that ski accident, we were actually talking about it, and she broke I forget what it was, the top of her bone of her leg, like it connects to her knee, plateau.
Tibial plateau, yeah.
And I think you were explaining that that's a pretty sensitive place to break, right?
Yes.
So I have a couple questions on her strength training going forward, but why is that?
So it would depend on if it was the medial or the lateral tibial plateau, like the inside or the outside part of the shin bone that was broken. But basically the inside bears about 60% of your body weight, because the bone... I
think it must have been inside, because that's what she was told.
Sure.
That it was bearing the majority of her body weight.
Yeah. So because it bears the majority of the body weight, and because the fracture happened at the top of the shin bone, well, that's basically your knee joint. So it's almost like she didn't break her knee, but that when you break that aspect, because there's a lot of cartilage and a lot of structures around that area that take a lot of the load, then that recovery time is going to be a lot longer than somebody who just maybe breaks the middle of the shin bone. So that recovery can take up to a year. It
took her a while. She's moving now, so she broke that. So a snowboarder blindsided her, took her out. She broke that. She's been moving fairly decent since about April, May. And now it looks like, what are we, September? So we're 9 months later, pretty much. And she's pretty good. But I can see how she was told she was doing really well and, kind of ahead of schedule on stuff. But I can see how that injury can take a long time. It was rough. And I tell everyone it was rough, not only on her, but I had to do a lot of shit. I had to do the laundry, Alex, and I hadn't done the laundry. I'm just joking. I would gladly help out, but I was starting to do things that I hadn't done in a long time. I was like, holy smokes, I really miss you, Carol. We need to get you rehab. Let me help with this rehab.
Yeah.
But, okay, so you rehab that part because it's bearing a lot of weight, and there's nothing really to do other than wait for the bone to heal, no?
So I guess this is the difference between your wife, is it Carol?
Carol, yes.
Carol, your wife's recovery, you saying she was going back to doing things in April, whereas somebody else can have that same injury, even maybe around that same age, and that recovery would be much longer,
really?
Right? Or even could be much shorter. Just these
are
all the other factors you have to be mindful of when you're looking at recovery, and everyone's normal and recovery is different, right? Like her normal might be to be able to return to yoga or be able to run 10K, where someone else's is just to walk normally, right? So you have to be mindful. I'm just saying this beforehand, but you just have to be mindful of all these other factors that play a role. And if Carol was active or, doing a lot of things before maintaining, eating healthy, exercising consistently, then that's going to put her in the advantage for her recovery. So even though the bone is healing, it's going to heal quicker relatively than somebody else who has these other comorbidities. Diabetes, smoking, those kinds of things can obesity can slow down people's recovery, right? So I think it's just important to delineate that and how those kind of things can play a role. Because if you ever go to the doctor's office or even a surgeon, or if you're having surgery, like an elective surgery, like if you want to get a hip replaced or knee replaced, they're going to always ask about, smoking history. They're going to ask about diabetes, because if you're smoking, you're constricting your blood vessels, and you need blood flow in order to promote tissue healing, right? Whether that be bone, whether that be tendon, ligament, meniscus. So if you don't, if you're smoking, then that could possibly prolong your recovery. And then if you're not getting that blood flow, that could increase the risk of some other complications like an infection, because you're not getting that blood flow.
Geez, I really never connected all these dots. Like, I've kind of known all these things, and it sounds so obvious when you say it, but I haven't really thought it through like that. So then what can she do now to continue to strengthen her bones? So, just turned 49. Maybe I shouldn't be sharing that. I'm not supposed to find out. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's too late now. And what can she do? Is it some of the strength, some of the stuff that you just mentioned?
Yeah. So strength training, it would depend on just what stage she's at, but I don't know. Like, I'm a big basketball guy, so the whole thing with Kawhi Leonard when he played for the Raptors, there's a whole topic on the load management stuff. So I think that's been a big kind of buzzword.
Why do you say that?
Just load management is basically, you have to be mindful of what your body can tolerate at any given time. So, she probably would have been in a period where she wasn't putting any weight on that leg for usually the first 6 weeks.
It was a while, yeah.
For the first, because that's how long generally it'll take the physiological healing to take place. And then afterwards, you wouldn't get her, okay, I haven't put weight on it for 6 weeks, let's start running, right? You have to gradually progress it. And with rehab, it's the same. That's the principle. If you get someone doing a lot of even injuries, how they happen is people will do something too soon. Maybe you haven't lifted in a year, and then you just go and try to, bench the amount that you were doing before, and you get injured, or you can have you can get sore, but you can also possibly get an injury. It's because your body can't just go 0 to 100 without any prior training stimulus. You have to gradually build it up. So in Carol's case, it would have to depend on how many months she is since the injury, what she's doing now, but it would just be, you go from strength training. Let's say we look at the block of strength training, because there's strength training, there's the aerobic training, there's plyometrics, there's balance, there's range of motion exercise. There's all these different kind of blocks that you look at for overall rehab. So from a strength training perspective, if she's able to, let's say, do exercises lying on her back where it's not as much load going through her legs because she's doing it in a non-weight bearing position. Once she gets past that, then she goes to, let's say, squats. Then you go from 2-leg squats to single leg squat possibly. Got it. Okay. And then from the single leg, you can increase weight, of course, but you can also increase time under tension. You can increase reps. You can increase sets. You can decrease rest. And then once you've, mastered the strength, the balance, the range of motion is full or within normal limits, then you try to maybe go to some plyometrics, right? Like, you jumping is going to be a lot more challenging, at least from how much your body and your bones and your joints can tolerate versus you just doing a body weight squat or like a squat with 10, 15 pounds. So then we get into jumping, and then you get into straight up and down jumping. Then you get into rotation jumping. You're trying to basically subject the tissue to different forces.
Why do you keep bringing up balance? What is balance showing you? Core strength? Like, what is the balance? Why you've said that a few times?
Yeah.
And I'm realizing the importance of balance more and more over the last few years. But yeah, why are you bringing it up? What is that showing you?
So with any sort of injury, and then even just from a quality of life perspective or injury prevention perspective, when you get hurt, you're not only losing the range of motion, the strength, the mobility, you're not working your proprioceptors, which are basically little receptors in your joints and around your joints that will tell you where your leg is in space, or your arm or your head or whatever. So it's not just for ankle sprains where you have to work on your balance. You have to work on your balance if you had surgery, if you had, that's a plateau fracture that your wife had. Balance plays a huge role in all of that. So you have to target the rehab in all different sections. Not to say that balance is more important than strength or range of motion, but they all kind of play a role.
Things.
Yeah. But as you get older, because what I was saying before, there's a lot of falls that happen. A lot of people break their hip because they fall, and that could be because they get dizzy or lightheaded. It could be just because they have poor balance. They're in a position where they just weren't able to react to that change in position. Like if you trip over a rug, if you tripped over a rug, you would be able to recover because you just bring your foot in front and you'd kind of stumble. Whereas if somebody doesn't have that reaction time, or that, because balance isn't just standing on one leg, it's being able to react if somebody nudges you, if you're walking by them and they bump into you, have to have that reaction as well to be able to recover. Otherwise, as you get older, if you don't work on it, then you fall. Because people don't really talk about the balance aspect as you get older. It's just strength, working on your heart.
I just had someone, I was at a clinic that does like optimal performance with like Olympic athletes and high performance athletes, and they're clients of ours here at Rockstar, and they asked me to come in and just kind of go through all these different machines. And it became obvious to me how important balance was, because when they tested my balance, with my eyes open and stuff, one-legged balance, I'm pretty good. But as soon as my eyes were closed, I almost fell over on my left leg. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And I just realized that I need to keep working on my balance. This looks like something that's fading on me. And now I see the importance of it, because as you age, you're right. As you trip and stuff, you want to be able to recover from these things pretty quick. And the better, obviously your strength is important in that kind of case as well. But the better your balance is, you can just catch yourself from falling. Jeez.
Yeah, for sure. And then even with the balance component, like you have 3 parts that are responsible for your balance. You have your vision, and then you also have your somatosensory system, which is those proprioceptors that are in your joints that tell you where your body is in space. But you also have your vestibular system. So your vestibular system is actually your inner ear, or components of your inner ear that detect where your head is in space. So if you can try this maybe after the show, or just go for a walk and then turn your head as you're walking. Try to see if you can stay walking in a straight line.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. As I've gotten older, I hate that more and more.
Yeah.
I hate going on roller coasters now because of that, because I used to love roller coasters. Now it's like, holy shit, I don't think I want to go on these things anymore. Damn.
Yeah. So that, like, people who say they have vertigo, right? Like, or even people.
Have you ever had, I've had vertigo. I had an infection in my ear on 9/11. When the Trade Center towers were collapsing, and they're like, everyone thought the world was being attacked and we were coming to an end. I had extreme vertigo. I barely got myself home from work. I passed out on the floor. I was like drooling out of the side of my mouth for like 2 days. Yeah. Because the moment I just kind of try to sit up or stand up, I had no balance whatsoever. So it's the most horrible experience. Have you ever had it?
No.
Okay, but you obviously know about it. Yeah. It's awful.
Yeah.
So I could not imagine having vertigo on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
You see that in some people?
I see that in some people. I don't treat those people who have that specifically. There are physios that do vestibular rehab. That's
really?
What it's called for those.
Okay.
And that's very, like, more of not a specialized niche, but you take more training with regards to treating those, because they have a completely different rehab or plan or program versus somebody who just has problems with their balance because of weakness.
What do you have a specialty that you like to focus on in your own clinic? I know at the hospital you're probably working on everything that comes your way, but in your clinic, do you like to focus on a certain thing?
I've treated a lot of basketball players, or like just kind of recreational basketball
players.
Showing
off because you're 6'5". Yeah. Okay. So you're
or like athletes, but also anybody. I don't really have a specialty. Like, I've treated, people who have concussions, people who have coming off fractures, people who have back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, just kind of.
Have you done any Achilles yet?
Yeah.
I tore my Achilles. That was awful. That was 8 months till I could run again.
Yeah.
And concussions. I've had a couple concussions. What do you do for concussions?
So concussions is a very multifaceted, I guess, approach to the rehab, because before it was thought that when you have a concussion, you lie in a dark room and you just close your phone, like no distract, nothing, just lie in a dark room. Yeah. But then research has shown that that's probably the worst thing that you can do. You want to just try to get them back to doing what they were doing at a modified level, as maybe after the first 1 or 2 days after the initial injury. But it's about always monitoring the symptoms. So not trying to push past that
was the challenging part with the concussion, because during the first part of a recovery of the concussion, you can't really do much before symptoms start. Like, you feel off balance, you feel groggy, tired, difficult to even use like motors or speak. So you could only do a little bit and then you would have to rest. And for someone, who's maybe not patient like myself, it's super frustrating. But that's the protocol now. It's a little bit more advanced than you're saying. It's just to kind of slowly progress day by day instead of trying to do nothing for days.
Yeah, just based on your tolerance. And then realizing that it's a brain injury, like it's a type of brain injury, and it's, needs to be taken seriously, and you have to rule out any other sort of red flags that can sometimes mask as concussions. Like if somebody has a bleed, or if somebody has something that doesn't really make sense maybe they have a fracture, because again, a concussion it doesn't always have to be a hit on the head. It can be something that just causes that.
Now I know that.
It's that acceleration, deceleration.
Yeah. You know what? I drive a Tesla now. My second concussion was, I'm not going to name the person because they're here at Rockstar and I don't want to name them, but it was from a Tesla that they had in like ludicrous mode or whatever. They got me to go in and I was looking sideways and they slammed the accelerator 3 or 4 times and I smashed my head back. And it was just that acceleration and that movement. And it gave me concussion symptoms, and I had them for weeks. I couldn't shake it. And it was just my head snapping back 3 or 4 times in a row like that. It gave me a freaking concussion, if you can believe it. Goddamn Tesla. Now I drive one. See how the whole world goes backwards? And now I'm like the slowest Tesla driver there is. But yeah, so I can kind of see that. Concussions are tricky things, man. I don't wish that on anyone. I'm glad that the science and the protocols are evolving here a little bit, though, because I found that was my first one was like 2011, I believe. And back then, you spoke about family doctors. Like back then, I went to just a walk-in clinic about 2 days after this bad car accident that I was in. And when I walked down the hallways of the doctor's office, I was bumping into the wall. Like I was totally off balance. And I sat down and I said, I think I have a concussion. And they said, I was in a big car accident 2 days ago, and they asked me a few questions, but then they said, you know what, the sounds of it, I think you have diabetes. I'm not even joking. This is like a true story. Family doctor. Never went back after this whole series of events with this doctor. And I'm like, no, I was in a bad car accident. I hit my head. I don't know anything about concussions, but I have symptoms that are like, I'm off balance. I'm feeling kind of groggy. And they said, no, I'm pretty sure you have diabetes. So let's do your blood work. So they did my blood work. I had to wait, I think 3 or 4 days to go back for the results. And they said, oh, you know what? This is really interesting. You don't have diabetes. And I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you, I think I have a concussion. And they're like, well, you know what? We should send you for a CT scan. So they sent me for a CT scan at the hospital. I had to wait like another week to get the CT scan. And then I think like 5 or 6 days. So another 2 weeks go by before I get the results. And then they're like, you have a brain tumor. And then the doctor tells me this. They're like, I'm not allowed to tell you anything else. You have to go to a specialist. So I get in my car. I call Carol and I'm like, Carol, she's like, how did it go? I'm like, well, I guess I have a brain tumor. And Carol's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, but I have no other information because the doctor's not allowed to tell me anything. Apparently they weren't even supposed to say that or something. And we have to wait for like a neurologist or someone. And the first appointment's like 2.5 weeks away. So for 2.5 weeks, I was telling Nick, Nick, I have a brain tumor. None of us knew if I was going to, it was crazy. Like the thoughts that go through your head, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to live. Like, am I going to live? Like, what's happening? Because all the symptoms I had were concussion symptoms. So then I started thinking, I guess I have a brain tumor and the symptoms are all from this tumor. And then I go see this neurologist. Appointment was about 2.5 weeks away, but friends of ours, their father runs a bunch of radiology clinics in the GTA and they had moved to California. They make a call and say, hey, can you get Tom an MRI a little sooner? Apparently he has a brain tumor. We're trying to get to the bottom of this. So I only had to wait 1 week. So thank God we knew somebody. That's the Canadian healthcare system. You basically need to know people. And they got me a cancellation, I think, at St. Mike's downtown Toronto. Like it was, same day they called and said, if you can be here in an hour and a half, we can, put you in because there's a cancellation. I went down there. I'll never forget. I was in Burlington at Dundas and Appleby Road, pulled off to the side. He calls me from California, the guy who owns all these clinics. He reviewed the file himself. And he goes, Tom, I see what the technician, I guess he called him a technician who did the CT scan, but I'd been talking about, there's a little bit of an anomaly kind of in where some of the blood vessels are. And to cover their butts, they said, possible tumor needs further exploration. And I can tell you now that you absolutely don't. This is just a little anomaly on one of the scans. You're totally in the clear. And I was like, when you just have this sigh of relief, like I started crying in the car. I was just bawling. called Carol. I go, Carol, I'm going to live. I don't have a brain tumor. And then I was back to the concussion symptoms because I still had concussion symptoms. So I never went back to that doctor. I didn't even report to them that I wasn't going to like die or something. And luckily someone referred me to the Hamilton hospital system, and they had like one person that was specializing in concussions. And they said, are you experiencing this and this and this? And I said, absolutely yes. And they're like, you have a concussion. And they kind of got me through a protocol that helped me out just with some rest and some speech therapy stuff and just some work. But my first concussion experience was bad. It was really bad. So I'm glad to hear what you're going through and describing. There's more protocols and more people seem to be aware of this stuff. Yeah, I went through diabetes and brain tumor to discover that I had a concussion. It was awful. I started thinking what I'm going to tell my kids. Like, I started writing letters to my children about life lessons. And I thought that was it. Anyway, Alex, we got way off target. It was shocking. Anyway, yeah. I want to transition a little bit to how do you, this is cool. Now you're a physiotherapist, you have your own clinic and stuff. Somehow you stumbled into us. Why? You're 29 years old. Why are you interested in like real estate? Like where's that coming from? Why that? Because that's like not related to anything we've discussed so far.
Yeah. So I would say why I got into real estate or looking more seriously into real estate is, I guess, part of what I had growing up was I always thought you just needed to buy a home when you only bought a home when you're married and with kids, and any mortgage is bad. You have to pay it off as soon as possible, because that's what I would see with my parents, right? Like they would buy a place and then they would try to pay it off as soon as possible, and
that was bad.
Yeah, that was bad. Exactly. Just based off of kind of what they thought or what they knew from the past. And I would kind of just go off of that. So I never really thought much about real estate when I was in undergrad or even in physio school. I think just what triggered it is just since the pandemic, like I had a little bit more, I was still working at the hospital, but I wasn't working at another clinic that I was at because I was doing part-time at the hospital, part-time at the clinic. So I had a little bit more time just to do some research and kind of learn about, what's happening, and is this something that I should really just wait until I get, married and have kids to buy a place, or can I just, look into getting that now? And then, as I was saying earlier, like just with you on before we started this, my girlfriend at the time was living in Toronto, and we were looking to buy a place, or looking to get a place in London. So she was going to move to London. We're going to stay in London for a little bit. And we were looking at places to rent, and we just couldn't find anything. And I just had a moment where I'm like, why am I going through all this time trying to find a place to rent? Again, not to say that there's anything wrong with renting. There's pros and cons, of course, to everything. But for me, working a lot and being able to save up a little bit of money and living at home alongside a lot of other, immigrants who finish school, or maybe just other people now with what's going on, I said, why don't I just, put a down payment, even though a lot of the homes were getting pricier. I just figured that why not just have something that's yours that I can call mine, and then we can always, rent it out or always sell it in the future. So then we just we switched gears and kind of went no more looking at places to rent. Let's just look for places to buy. So it was a pretty tough few months, and thank you to my real estate agent, Osmond, for putting up with a lot of the things that, I just had millions of questions. And just looking at so many, right? I was so green, and it was just so much money at the time, and I just is this too much, over asking, all that stuff you're analyzing, and we ended up getting a place, a townhouse in London, like in West London, so a decent area, which I know you always say, buy properties in good areas.
Good areas,
once I got that, I just got so fascinated with it, with just, first of all, everything that's going on in the world, just with regards to, everything's getting more expensive, but your wages are just growing at inflation rates, quote unquote, and just seeing how, and even you alluded to yourself just on previous episodes, like some people don't even really want to get into real estate. They just feel like you have to,
because forced.
Otherwise, how are you going to, get that advantage or that upper leg by going into things like real estate?
It's a defense when interest rates are, and I know some people don't like when I say this, but when they're manipulated the way they are, and to me they are, because it's a small group of people in a central bank, of this country that decides the cost of money. For Alex, for you, like what you borrow, you're going to pay whatever interest rates they decide is right. Like today, they just change interest rates again. So we have this manipulated interest rate that's not a true reflection of the free market. It's just dictated by what some people in a central authority decide is right and wrong. So they dictate the cost of money. And when people that are younger, that sometimes blocks them out of housing, because when interest rates have been kept low for so long like they have, assets like housing go up in price. The value of the dollar decreases, the asset takes more of these dollars to buy the asset, and it really makes it a barrier to get into asset ownership of any kind, houses, businesses, anything, because everything just costs more. And then if somebody like maybe myself now at this age has acquired a little bit of financial success or savings, it puts you into a defensive mode. So instead of keeping my money in the bank and earning an interest rate, when I see the way money is manipulated, I'll take my money and defensively buy real estate with it, because it's better than keeping it in the bank where it's going to lose value. And what that does is it blocks real estate from other people who are just getting in the market, because there's like people like me forced into the real estate market to protect my purchasing power, right? So the manipulation of the money at many levels really wrecks a system that could be great. If we just let banks fail and didn't save them when there's a financial crisis, and interest rates were a true reflection of the free market, they would be naturally higher than they've been for the last 15 years. I would keep my money in the bank. I could just keep my money in the bank, save my money, make interest. Now I'm not competing against other people for properties, making it more expensive for a younger generation to buy these properties. And I'm forming savings in the bank, forming capital, which I might then take. And if I think I can use that capital to earn more than the 7 or 8% that I'm earning in the bank, assuming rates were like real and I was getting a nice hefty savings rate, I would have to go do something productive in the economy that would earn me more than 7 or 8%. So whatever I do in the economy with my money, my capital, better be freaking pretty good, because I got to earn like 10% return to be better than keeping it in the bank. So it forces entrepreneurs to actually produce good product and services to the society around them. Whereas when it's all manipulated, it's like, well, screw that. I'm not going to save any capital. Any money I get, I better tuck it away into something really quick. Otherwise, the value is being destroyed. So you don't have capital formation, which is needed for development of new factories, new technology, new hospitals. We need capital formation, and we don't have it. I'm going off again, Alex. I apologize. But it really hurts your generation, because you have a bunch of people forced into defensive mode who don't want to lose value, who go buy properties in London that bid up the price. So when the young generation like yourself comes in, it's more expensive for you to buy in, because you got guys like me in the late 40s going, well, shit, I can't keep my money in the bank. It just loses value because they've kept rates so low for so long. So I better go buy some property. It's all kind of backwards. And now they're trying to quote unquote fix it by raising rates so high that with this much debt in the system, the next year to me looks really weird, because there's a lot of debt in the system. Nick and I were just crunching some numbers, and that if the 10-year treasury is at 3.2% right now in the US, it's between 3.2 and 3.5. But the US debt at 3.2%, if it was to all roll over and be renewed at that interest rate, it would cost $1 trillion in interest payments. Right now, they're paying $400 billion. So they're paying $400 billion in interest. They're already broke and run annual deficits. But at the new interest rate, it's going to cost them, just to finance the $30 trillion in debt they have today, $1 trillion. So they need to print another $600 billion out of thin air to just pay for the interest on the debt. What's that going to do to the values of the dollar in the economy? It's going to make it worth less. It's going to make asset prices go higher. So we're in this weird time where interest rates are going up, real estate's kind of coming down, but you can kind of see into the future a little bit and say, wait a second, these higher rates are just going to mathematically require more money printing. This is just going to be a nightmare. And I don't understand where this ends, Alex. So I'm hoping your generation can figure it all out, man. You got a lot of stuff to do. You got to keep us all healthy, and you got to figure out the entire financial system and take care of yourself. And you said you're engaged recently?
Yeah. I was engaged for about the last month and a half.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So you started having this kind of realization that you need to kind of get into something else. You buy the property, you have the townhome, And then now, at your age, starting your own, you're working, but you also have your own clinic. Now this property, you're talking about maybe moving again. So what does someone your age think about the world right now? Like, do you feel like you can craft the future here in Canada that you want? I'm giving you, I don't know. I didn't prep you for this, man, but I'm just interested in your take on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like back in the day when we moved, obviously, and I'm super appreciative Canada was able to give us that opportunity to come in and be able to have an education and all the benefits that we had growing up. I'm super grateful for, but it's interesting just over the last couple of years, it's really made a lot of people think twice about that, just with regards to what's been going on. And I've never paid attention to the news or politics.
You've been busy, man. Basketball in school.
Yeah, exactly. As I was younger, but now, like, just especially like over like with COVID and everything, I'm glued. I'm listening to like the debates, and I'm paying attention to like
the shouting and screaming on Twitter and on online.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, obviously you can go down that rabbit hole where you're just being mindful too much of all the negativity and stuff that you're seeing online. But yeah, it's scary. It's scary, but it's also you have to be flexible just as a person in terms of trying to find different ways to create success, whether that be relationships or financial or personal. But I think just being able to be adaptable, and I think just seeing what's been happening over the last couple of years. I've never considered living anywhere other than Canada, but just hearing stories from other people or even friends. Like I know there's one person or a couple of people actually in like the area that have moved back to Serbia,
really,
or to the areas. Yeah, just because it's getting.
I believe it. Yeah,
like my generation, just younger, and things that you would never think about. Like that's such a major jump. You did school here, you spent so many years. Would that translate over? Like needing to know the language, but a lot of people are just like a lot of young people. I think a lot of old people too, or just all generations, are just looking at whether that be an alternate home somewhere else, where if something happens like what's happened before with the lockdowns, like to have that freedom to be.
Get me a place in Florida. Get me a home in Florida, so I have some freedom.
Yeah. So it definitely makes you think and look for alternatives, or just see that things that were maybe not a reality before, you're just looking at things more. So I mean, I don't know where the future holds or where I'm going to be in the future, but I mean, we definitely talked about it. I've definitely talked about it with my fiance Carmen. She's from British Columbia, so the plan would be to move out west over there. And after you've been there, I don't know if you've been there, but
I've only been there twice, very briefly. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I can see why. Like, there's such a big move, because there's a lot of people in Ontario that make the move, and I mean, it is obviously more expensive. But at the same time, like, just being able, the vibe and the culture and the, and just the outdoorsy lifestyle and just being active, like, it fits highly with kind of our values. And she's a physiotherapist as well.
Oh,
actually.
Cool.
So we both like, going on hikes, like going swimming, like all that stuff. So it would be really cool. And I've lived in London basically my whole life, so it would be.
I thought you were gonna say too long.
Yeah.
You've been in London, yeah,
for a while. Yeah.
Got it. So British Columbia would be a nice place, and I think the thing is just the fact that you're being aware of what's going on in the world. We're all so resilient. Like, sometimes I get like all tied up in a knot over some of these financial things that I think are just breed a financial inequality that shouldn't need to exist. We're all so resilient. Like, you're going to have a great life, and you're just going to find your way, and just being aware of some of these things will help you, because then you'll understand that not all debt is bad debt, and having a bit of debt in a debt-based money system could be good. So maybe you keep that property. I think you were mentioning that if you moved, you might try and keep that property in London that you have and turn that into a rental property or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Those are the things at your age, thinking that way now, just will kind of set you on a course that's going to be amazing. So your future is bright. And are you still playing basketball at all? Like, do you play in some men's leagues?
I was playing, but then with the lockdowns last year, I just decided, like, they were closing down the gyms and all that, and then I just kind of stopped. But I'm gonna get back into it this fall. That's the plan. Try to stay active and hopefully not get injured myself.
Yeah. Alex, I thank you for doing this, man. I don't think you really had to come all the way out here to do this and kind of share some of your story, but I really thank you for it, man. And I just want you to know that like you have friends here. So, as you guys kind of trailblaze your way through your own lives, if you need some help in any capacity, reach out to us here. We're going to be doing this for a long time. There's a great team here. And if you just need advice on something, you're looking something in British Columbia and you want our opinion on it, just always feel free to reach out and know that you have some friends that will support you here, man. Anything else I should have been asking you that we didn't ask? I wanted to talk about your parents, your physio stuff, some of your real estate thoughts. Anything else that was on your mind that you wanted to be sharing?
Yeah, I think just mentioning this, like with regards to what we were saying about the savings, like I think just growing up with that and thinking, you should technically be rewarded with, if you're going to leave money in a savings account, you should earn something. But you look at some of these accounts that are earning like 0.0015%. And, you see that from my parents, like, save money, but it's like, you have to try to look outwards into these different streams and real estate. And then even, Bitcoin and getting into that is been huge, like just from a learning perspective and seeing that there's more to life than just working for that, paycheck, that working that 8 to 4.
I think you said that in the first communication that like that was something you stood out that you had heard on one of our podcasts, that when I was going to take a vacation, I was always irritated by the fact that like if I left for too long from the corporate world, I always felt like I was going to lose my accounts if you were in sales. And, something to be taken away, almost like a threat, like you better not be on vacation for too long. Otherwise, your job security is at risk. And I always just thought, like, what kind of life is this? Like, this doesn't feel like the way we should be living. Like, we're always just under attack and threat, and you work hard to get a bit of vacation. And maybe I'm too much of an idealist, but I just feel like that type of setup doesn't extract the best of humanity, because everybody's running around slightly scared that they're going to lose their job, slightly scared that they don't have enough money to retire. It's kind of shitty. And a lot of it stems from our problems with money. It's like the money system. Like one of the simplest ways I break it out to people is I'm like, you realize our money system is a debt-based money system. So in its simplest form, and some of the technicalities are going to be glossed over in this description, but in its simplest form, if the first dollar in Canada came to in existence as a form of debt, because we're a debt-based money system, so that, the treasury borrows money in the country and, we get issued new dollars from the Bank of Canada. And I'm generalizing here for anyone who gets really technical, but the dollars that come into an existence have to be paid back with interest because we're a debt-based money system. So the very first dollar that came into an existence in that type of economy in Canada had to be paid back with interest. Well, if the first dollar that came into an existence had to be paid back with interest, where does the money come from to pay that interest? Because if only $1 was created, the very first dollar that was created had to be paid. It was borrowed. It's debt. It was borrowed into existence. That's the way our money system works. And it had to be paid back with interest. Where does the money come from to pay the interest? Well, the only way to get enough money to pay the interest is to borrow more dollars into existence. So we live in a system that requires more and more borrowing. Otherwise, there's not enough money to pay for the system. And so that we just live in an economy that more and more debt must be created. Like this isn't an option. So if more and more debt isn't created, there's literally not enough dollars to pay all the debt off. So we live in a world where if the debt doesn't expand, the amount of dollars in the system doesn't expand, it all collapses. Which means the value of our dollars are programmatically set to lose value. There must be more dollars printed. It can't go the other way. Deflation, the opposite of inflation, deflation, reducing the money supply, doesn't work because the debt won't have enough dollars to pay off the debt. So they must increase the money supply at all costs. That's why when I see interest rates going up like today, and everybody's freaking out about real estate prices and stuff, I'm like, well, if you just have a little bit of patience, the money's going to come into the system. Because if it doesn't come into the system, the whole system collapses. And even if that happens in that environment, you want to own hard assets because, where your parents were born, when that war broke out there, the people who had any assets ultimately kind of made it through it. So like if you had some pigs or some cows and there was like hyperinflation, the currency went to shit, well, you still had the pigs and cows. If you were lucky enough to maybe have a a property on the coast or something that you rented out to vacationers, and the currency went to crap, and your mortgages were now paid in Swiss francs instead of I guess it would be the dinar back then, you still had the rental property. So the currency goes up in smoke. The price of your real estate might fluctuate greatly in dinars. It was Yugoslavian dinars back then. But if that all went to shit, you still had the rental property. So in a debt-based money system, to me, your future financial success is highly dictated or correlated with the quality of assets that you own. And the prices of them might fluctuate wildly, but don't even worry about it. As long as you can carry the debt load confidently, so your rental property, as long as you're covering it, you're not buying stupid stuff with debt, and you have income to cover the debt, take it on. Because if that helps you acquire good assets, ultimately that's going to make you win the day. Whereas just saving, like you're saying, or just having an income and no assets, when everything goes up into smoke programmatically because the dollar must lose value over time, you're left with nothing. I'm just ranting again, Alex, and it's confusing concepts. Like it's kind of hard to grasp some of the stuff. I think when I first started reading about it, I'm like, what is going on? This all seems backwards to me. But for you, I think you're right. You're bringing up Bitcoin. It's like a lot of people now are, if they got into Bitcoin at the high and now it's come down in price, they're like, oh, what the hell is this? But in my mind, it's like, understand what you own. Understand your properties and why you own them. Understand Bitcoin and what it is and what's unique about it. And when you have really strong conviction about why you own certain things, the price is doesn't bug you as much. Might be easy for me to say. I'm like older guy now. I have multiple streams of income and stuff, so things change, but I don't know. Anyway, we'll stop. I'm ranting, but I'm glad you're into this stuff, Alex. It's important, man. So it's cool. Keep going down this rabbit hole, especially the Bitcoin one. I think that's the one when you go down it, you're like, holy smokes, hard money. What is this? How does this work? Nobody can confiscate it. It's difficult to censor. I can move it around globally. What is this thing? It's a pretty deep rabbit hole. Gets you into a lot of stuff, Is that, have you kept reading on that topic?
Yeah. Actually, I read the Bitcoin Standard.
Oh, awesome.
I need to read it one more time, but
I know.
It's just really interesting. Just again, seeing the history of money and just all your perceptions just on money and growing up. It's crazy. I feel like financial literacy needs to be something that's taught at the high school level because everybody's going to have to deal with money eventually. And I wish that I was, everybody, hindsight is 20/20, but I wish I had that thought. But it was just when you're coming out of school, you're like, get a good job, get a good paying job that has benefits and is consistent hours and stuff like that. And then you start working and you think that all that effort and that time that you put into getting your degree and working a job. I mean, fortunately for physio, there is a lot of demand just because of the aging population. And
you have demographics on your side.
Yeah.
You're riding a good trend.
You could kind of pick and choose, but at the same time, like even now, like if you look at how much, let's say, average salary for a physiotherapist is now versus what it was 10 years ago. I mean, if it's going up a couple % with inflation, but everything's going up much more than that, then you need to look at alternative ways of diversifying. And that just kind of motivated me to, ever since I got the property, to I was in the live class online, and I think that's just, I went down that rabbit hole very, very fast. I just started researching everything just on everything that you can learn about real estate. Obviously, there's so much that I don't know, but this stream was never even a possibility if I just either lived at home for the next little bit or if I was just renting, because I don't care. But now you can just see all the benefits, and that's also what kind of motivated me to open up my own clinic, just in terms of from a tax perspective, how many benefits are there, and also there's some politics as well in healthcare. And I was working, for a clinic that I wasn't really a big fan of, and that kind of motivated me to go run my own thing because I wanted to treat how I wanted to treat. I didn't want there to be any I wanted my own politics. Like I could see however many I wanted to see. I didn't want it based off of what that clinic's policy was, and I wanted
because there's time. I guess they were forcing you to,
like, they just wanted you to see a certain number of people per hour, whereas I'd be running late for patients because I wanted to spend more time with them, or their needs demanded more than that 20-minute frame. I wanted 45 minutes, and obviously I was running late, so that wasn't good for the next patient. But at the same time, like, I didn't feel like I was giving them everything I could in that certain time period. Whereas now when I have my own clinic, like, I can we're usually running over time, but it's okay because I'm not required to see 10 to 20 people a day. I just see a couple people. I, give them as good quality care as I can, and there's a lot of benefits from that.
If anyone's in the London area, how would they find you? What's the best? Do you have an email, URL? What is there something you can hand out?
Yeah, so I have Instagram account. It's Alex_physio, ALEKS _physio, PHY, SIO. And then I have a booking website. So I don't have like a actual, but just a booking website where just
to book time with you.
Yeah. So
is that linked from the bio on Instagram or no?
No, it's not.
What's the booking website?
That's alexphysio.
Yeah.
All one word, .janeapp, JANEAPP.com.
Yeah, cool.
And then I have a YouTube account too. That's Alex Physio, just all, or not one word, but just Alex space Physio. So I'm trying to grow that to help with the business.
Cool.
And go from there. Yeah.
The future is bright with people like you, with the mindset that you have, man. That's kind of cool to hear. A favorite NBA team? Oh, it's not the Raptors? Whoa.
Honestly, I was one of those where it's where LeBron James goes because he's my favorite player. But
no, wait,
now
really?
It's
I don't know. I feel like ever since he
fan.
left Cleveland the first time, it was kind of irked me a little bit. You were probably too young to maybe even remember that, but LeBron's your guy.
Yeah,
LeBron.
Yeah.
Like I know he's amazing, but LeBron.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't really have. I would probably just say the Raptors just because obviously it's the hometown, but I like the Lakers and I like Denver as well because they got Nikola Jokic. He's
and he's turning into a basically superstar.
Yeah,
I guess he's already basically superstar status. MVP or no? I feel like he was in the running. I forget.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was MVP last year.
Was he last year?
Yeah.
He's kind of freaky because the way he moves, like I'm like, is this guy really like an athlete or not? But I mean, because he's so big, like he kind of moves up. But the way he plays, man, and the way he passes the ball out, like this guy's incredible.
Very like European, unselfish. Like, comes from a farm town in Serbia, so he just has that big boy.
Yeah, he really does, man. Yeah. Alex, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our paths will continue to cross paths, and thanks, man. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Terms show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.